Welcome to the Kentucky Auto Accident Podcast. Louisville attorney Jim Desmond has been handling injury cases related to traffic accidents for over 20 years. Jim will provide valuable information to help you and your family. He wants you to understand the important issues you need to know when it comes to handling car accidents and motorcycle wrecks in Kentucky. There's a lot riding on this, so let's get started. Friends, we are back in the studio with attorney Jim Desmond. Jim, welcome back, guy.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
I love this topic, how to stay out of a car wreck. You're one of the few attorneys who's telling people, look, I like you guys. I don't necessarily need you to be my client, so I'm going to give you some advice.
Right.
So let's jump into this. Why did you pick a topic like that?
Well, I mean, the first thing, I'm like every other attorney where I advertise on TV and such like that, and I say, okay, call me if you've been in one, but I don't want somebody to be in a car wreck. It's not my goal. I try to keep my family out of car wrecks. I try to keep myself out of car wrecks. I tell all my clients at the end of the case, hopefully I don't see you again because of the kind of work I do. So again, I mean, the first step is nobody wants to be in a car wreck. Nobody wants to have a personal injury claim. And I, even as a personal injury attorney, I don't want you to as well. That's not where my enjoyment comes from. My enjoyment comes from that, God forbid it happens, it's like a puzzle was just created when that car accident happened. And I'm trying to put those pieces together. Your pieces being getting your car fixed, is the insurance coverage in place? Is there uninsured coverage that I talk about all the time? Underinsured coverage? How much insurance is on the other driver? All these things you have to put together. How are we going to get your medical bills paid? Are we going to use the no-fault coverage? Or are we going to use your health insurance? Or are we going to use both? And how are we going to get you the treatment you need? That's the puzzle that I enjoy putting together. And that's the part that, somebody had to remind me the other day. My law practice is 18 years old, actually this month.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I've been practicing law over, I think we're at 30 years now. But that's why I do just car wrecks, because again, it's not an easy little puzzle that any attorney can put together. It really, to do it right and do it well, it's kind of a complicated puzzle that after somebody's been in a car wreck, how do you get them back on the road? How do you get their bills paid? You got to be able to put all that together. But obviously, I don't want anybody to ever be hurt. I look at insurance, I look at crash test results from the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety all the time, and I tell my friends about what cars I think, crash well. I put my family in safe ones. Because again, a personal injury claim, that's the problem with a personal injury claim. The worse you're hurt, the better the value of the claim. Well, nobody wants to be hurt badly, and nobody has said to me it's been worth it, anything that they've had to go through.
That makes a lot of sense. Hey, let's jump into this. I know your first tip here is just advice about driving is a team sport. What do you mean by that?
I think we all get on the road and we act like we're playing a game of tennis, like it's just us, and as long as we follow the rules, we can hit the ball. It's not the case. It's more like a football field, where again, you have to understand, you can't get into the end zone unless you know where everybody is and where they're going, okay? You've got to have first of all, even on that analogy, think about it, you have to have a game plan. If you got people, I see this all the time. If I know I'm going somewhere, I have to start thinking ahead of time, what lane of travel do I need to be in? Which way am I going to go? Am I going to avoid a certain route because of turns? I mean, there's some places that have bad left turns or something. I don't want to go that way. It's a team sport in the sense of, driving is a team sport in the sense that to stay out of an accident, and that's what you want to do, you got to be aware of everything around you, and you got to react always differently. Everybody, my opinion, there's a lot of emphasis on the rules of the road, all right? I don't want you to ignore the rules of the road. I don't want to, have the state calling me saying, I told you to violate a law, but I'm more interested in keeping you out of an accident than to basically worry about whether you were speeding or turned left or something, and it was turning red. It's more about avoiding the hazards than anything else.
And that's what I like about this. This is defensive driving, and sometimes it's offensive, but a lot of times it's defensive driving because people tend to zone out when they're in their cars, but the other person beside them may be doing the same thing, and that's when bad things happen.
Well, and I want everybody to get along. I believe in not treating people badly, but when it comes to cars, that's the one place you can stereotype people, and you probably should. And I don't mean to be like that, but in the sense of you see a bad driver or you see a bus or a taxi or something else, or a big U-Haul truck, get away from it. Stereotype them and say, okay, look, I've already seen you do something bad. I'm either going to give it gasoline or slow down to basically stay away from that vehicle. And, is it paranoia? Yes. But a good defensive driver, like you just brought up being a defensive driver, what is a good defensive driver? They basically are paranoid about what's going to happen, and you take a look at everybody else, and if you think they're going to do something stupid, you assume they're going to do something stupid.
Yeah, you have to assume sometimes.
Right. And it is one of those that, I mean, I'm sorry, but I've seen enough accidents that if I see cars on the road that are not taken care of, or just have a new license plate, or the big TARC buses, I do what I can to not be near them, because I know I don't want to take a chance what they're going to do. Just like with a semi-tractor trailer, they're good professional drivers, but I don't want to be around a tractor trailer. They don't have that same maneuverability I do. Something happens, I'm in trouble. That thing can't stop on a dime.
No, and they may be reacting to another driver, and you just happen to be in the wrong place at the right time. I mean, that's always something to think about. You talked a little bit about speeding. You dropped a comment on that, and I want to come back to that. A lot of people are so worried about the speed limit that they allow themselves to suddenly get into a bad situation. You talked about getting away from that.
Exactly.
Do you want to come back to that a little bit? Because I believe in this 100%.
Yeah, everybody's worried about speeding, and the police officers have done a great job trying to keep people, from driving excessive speeds, and I get that. But in the same respect, it's a guideline, and I shouldn't say it's a guideline because you'll get a ticket, but I'd rather get a ticket than be in an accident any day of the week. I can handle a ticket in the morning. I'm not going to be dealing with an accident or injuries for 2 years. I don't want to be dealing with accidents or injuries for 2 years, which is what can happen when you're in a lawsuit, or even just a personal injury claim. It's a guideline in the sense that, if you're passing somebody, you're going in the other person's lane. You can't keep that car under the speed limit. Give it gas, get around them. If a police officer saw you and would he give you a ticket? Maybe. Who cares? I don't mean to be like that. People want to act like the gas pedal is an evil thing. It's not. If you're turning left, you don't have the right of way. Okay, you're going to be at fault 99% of the time if you're turning left in front of somebody. Give it gasoline and get the heck out of that other guy's way. Okay,
that frustrates me all the time. It's like, people, you don't have to wait for 2 football fields for the clearance before you travel. Right. Was it 12 feet across the lane? I mean, go.
Right, go. And especially when you start your turn, you don't make a slow turn, because now you're in a hazardous position. So you got to get basically out of the way. It's not them. You've got to get out of the way. People always talk to me about on the left-hand turns. They'll say, well, the other guy was speeding. Kentucky is what you call pure comparative fault, which essentially means the accident has to add up to 100%, but you can divide it how you want. If someone was really speeding on the other side and coming against you, it's still only 20, 30% fault maybe against them if you can prove it. The law is not about what we think happens. It's the law is about what we can prove. So again, it's 20 or 30% fault might be on them, but the majority of the fault's going to be on you, if not all, because again, you don't have the right of way. So get out of the way to do it. Something I always do, if there's a vehicle, I don't like how it's traveling, either slow down and go fall behind them, or go ahead and speed up and get in front of them. Last night I was going out to a restaurant. Same concept. I saw somebody. I could tell that she was not really paying attention. I pull up at the light, as a matter of fact, next to her, and I see the cell phones out. I'm like, okay, great. So when I was going down Brownsboro Road, basically I gave it a little gas, and I was probably doing 5 above the speed limit. But that way she was behind me. I didn't have to worry about her being to the left or right or stopping fast. None of that. It's your car, the rules of the road are one thing, but let's face it, a good defensive driver always responds every time to basically whatever hazard comes up, because we don't know what the hazard's going to be.
And that's where that initial reference about it's almost like going on a football field. You got to figure out where all the players are and how they're reacting, so you know what your next move is.
Correct, because you can't get in the end zone otherwise, because all of a sudden you thought you had a straight shot and you see somebody coming over ready to tackle you. That's kind of like the car coming from your left or something. I cover my horn a lot. I'll be, if I come up to intersections or something, I'll cover my horn a lot and just be ready to hit it. Even on intersections, you've got to make us, the lights alone, let's go from speeding to traffic lights, okay? Quit acting like a traffic light is your blank check, all right? It means you have the right to go. But again, a good defensive driver, might pull out a little bit, but they're looking to the left and right, and they're saying, is anyone going to run this traffic light or not? And, they're before they actually get in the intersection. Because what happens for me, let's put it in the personal injury side. You're in a car accident, you say you had the green light, the other guy's going to say he had the green light. Maybe there was even a witness that stopped, but you didn't think to get his name. Now all of a sudden we're looking back for video, hoping it's caught, not only the accident, but the traffic light on camera. And now we've got an argument where we got 2 drivers, and instead of them being at fault, it might be 50-50 when it comes to fault. So again, it's one of those, if you think about it ahead of time, it's the same thing with pedestrians. Pedestrians, I love them, but they have the concept that they have the right of way. Well, first of all, if you're in a car accident with a pedestrian, not only does the car has to cover the first $10,000 in medical bills. That's the no-fault part of the state in Kentucky. But if you're in a car accident with a pedestrian, it's not, okay, you cross the middle of a highway and you're a pedestrian and everybody had to stop. They're going to still argue comparative fault if you're not in the crosswalk, if you're not crossing with the light, all these things. And of course, none of that saves you from the fact that you have this 3,000-pound piece of metal coming at you that's going to put you in the hospital. So the bigger issue is, rather than worry about who has the right of way, stop and make sure that driver knows you're there and then go. The communication with other drivers is essential.
No, and I think that frustrates a lot of us because, again, crosswalks are there for everybody's safety, and just people just totally disregard them most of the time. Everybody's distracted, cell phone or whatever, or a pedestrian just assumes, well, I always have the right of way. No, you actually probably don't in some circumstances.
Right.
So, again, but as a driver, you have to be, aware of all of that.
Driver, you got to be aware of all of it, but again, that's the problem. I mean, most people these days, they don't look at it, as we said, as like a team sport. They look at it like they can just get on the road, go straight, do the 45-mile-per-hour speed limit, and they'll be fine, which is not the case. And then at other times they're on their phone or have their cell phone out or they're texting.
Right. Yeah, everybody drives in a bubble until they're not in that bubble anymore. We touched on this briefly, but as we were prepping for the show, you talked a little bit about not stopping in the middle of the road.
Yeah.
And you want to kind of get into this because this one, I think this one causes a lot more accidents than it should because the driver who's stopping isn't aware of, hey, is this actually a good time? I'm trying to do a favor, but in fact, I'm actually putting people in danger.
Well, a lot of people will try to be courteous and let other people out, and I get that. But the problem is, what's everybody expecting you to do? I mean, if you think about it, you don't want to stop in the middle of the road and do that if no one's expecting you to stop. If you're already stopped, I get it. You can try to say, okay, is there a clearance? But realistically, if no one expects you to stop in the road, and put it in the context, you'll see if you put it in the highway, you couldn't do that in the highway. But, again, people will say, well, on the road, it's it's being courteous. No, I came up on somebody the other day, and they did that, where they're stopped in the middle of the road. I'm like 3 cars back, and we're all wondering why we're stopped. Because, again, now the problem is we were all judging our distances. Now, all of a sudden, we got to stop suddenly. And we're like, because, again, somebody was just trying to be courteous, which I get. But courtesy only goes so far. You have to ask yourself, what is the guy behind me doing? What does he think I'm doing? Communication is so huge. I've noticed that where, if you pull up, whether it's a pedestrian or anything else, if I throw up my hand to them, okay, again, because they've given me a nod to cross, I know basically what they're doing, that they're giving me time. They know I've recognized them. The cars, again, the stopping. Signals, using them ahead of time. It's that, again, most drivers, I don't want you to have to call a personal injury attorney. Right, this is the whole thing of this podcast. Yeah. I don't want you to. Well, how do you avoid that? You avoid that by thinking, rather than, okay, I want to be courteous, or I want to not speed, or I want to do, what's the hazard and what am I creating for that other guy?
Is this the right time to be courteous?
Exactly.
You, in your notes for this podcast, we talked about checking the blind spot, which, again, that's something everybody should do, but I know we get lazy. They look in the rearview mirror, but they don't see that gap. So I've always taught my kids, look over your shoulder, physically turn around and look.
Every time. And on that issue, it's 2 things. I love cars. Everybody knows that about me. So when it doesn't hurt, like if you actually pay attention again and you say, okay, I know I've got a Chevy Traverse coming up on my side. First of all, it makes it a little easier to know whether somebody's in that spot. But 2, I don't let people ride in my blind spot. I don't ride in theirs. Back to the speed. If I got to give it gas or if I got to go slow down, so that either way, but we're not going to be in that blind spot together. Okay. And part of that, one of the best pieces of advice that a driver instructor gave me years ago is don't drive in a wolf pack. Okay.
Yeah. I love this concept.
Yeah. Because, again, if you think about it, and I see this all the time on the highway, if I'm going across the country, if I go down to like Florida or something, I'll give it gas to get out of that wolf pack, because there'll be 4 or 5 cars all within a short distance of each other, pretty much diagonal to each other. And again, you have to say, what's my way of getting out of things? What something happens, which way do I go? Years ago, I'm luckily not been in many accidents, but years ago I had a tire blowout on a Volvo, and I did not control it well, unfortunately, and it spun 360s and then went off the side, and I was on the Snyder. luckily, the reason I didn't get in another accident, because again, I wasn't in a wolf pack. Nobody else was around. So again, there was nobody hurt, nothing damaged. Police officer took a report, but there was no issues. And again, because there was nobody around.
Right.
I had thought about who's, because I want to be able to stop. Not people think about this all the time. They want to follow at a safe distance, which I get and I agree with. If you rear end somebody, you're going to be at fault. Again, 95, 100% of the time, you're probably going to be at fault. I don't care if they stop because a squirrel crossed the road. You're supposed to follow at a safe distance, is what the law says. But again, not just in front of you, and you can't control what's behind you, but you can control what's on either side of you. And again, get out of that wolf pack. Get to the point where you won't have anybody around you for a little while, because now you've created a means of reacting. If a board falls off a truck, or somebody swerves, or a tire
animal pops out in the middle of the road.
You've got means and time to react. I think they say it takes on average like 2 seconds for us to react to anything we see. So again, you want to give yourself, basically that space, distance, and time to react.
I've got two other points I want to get in before we close out the podcast today. And I chuckled when I first saw this in your notes. Parking lots are a free for all. Let's talk about parking lots.
Oh yeah, parking lots, forget them. Just write them off, guys. One of my instructors years ago said, you want to avoid all car accidents. He's got the solution. He says, what we'll do is we'll get you on the highway. We'll put one car on the highway at Grinstead, and we won't let the other one come on until the other guy reaches downtown. Well, that's kind of what you need to do with parking lots, is literally have us all just waiting to get in there, go do our business, then get out. Parking lots are free for all. The rules of the road should apply, where you shouldn't be cutting across traffic. You should be going down the lanes. You should be looking, but it's a free for all. People don't think they have to, well, first of all, police can't give tickets on private property. Okay. Second of all, they don't think they have to follow the rules, and they'll cut across lanes. There's no cars or anything. But again, where's everybody at? What are you doing? Do I know what you're doing? I'm the other driver beside you. Somebody pulled up the other day that I could have sworn, I was getting ready to walk in someplace. I thought he was doing a U-turn, and instead he was pulling up right up to the front of the place to let somebody out. I'm like, again, nobody had any clue because of the way he acted and the way he did things.
And then you have pedestrians in there as well who just think, well, I'm on foot, so I have literally been backing out of a spot, and they're 2 or 3 spaces around or away from me, and just continue right behind me. I'm like, this was almost a Darwin moment. You got to be heads up. You really do.
Did you see the pedestrian or not?
Not until it got really, really close to my bumper.
Yeah, and the backing out, and the worst part is I have a case that actually happened where somebody got pinned. Very nice lady too. So pinned between bumpers. It's bad too. It was a bad injury. But even on backing up is one of the, not only am I turned my head around, because I learned years ago you can't trust mirrors. Okay,
Yep.
They don't have the whole view. Some cars have backup cameras, which are great. But even there, I'm going to try to turn my head around, do all of it, and also go slow. And, I try to go slow again to tell people, because if somebody's coming along, I'm trying to let them see my lights that I am backing up.
Yep.
And if I don't know what's behind me, I'm doing multiple turns maybe. Many times I drive a big old SUV, and, it doesn't have a backup camera. If I can't see it, I'm going to go ahead and do multiple turns. It's going to take longer, but guess what? I know I'm not going to hit anything behind me.
Bingo. And I tell you what, let's wrap up today's episode with something that literally is going to have people cheering. And if you're listening to this podcast episode and you have a way to react to it, please give us a thumbs up. Stay out of the left lane.
Yes.
Stay out of the left lane. You want to explain that?
I wish the police would enforce that, because it's, if you ever go in the highway, you see keep right except to pass. Well, my dad told me years ago, and right or wrong, it's still good philosophy. He said, look, treat every roadway, every 2-lane roadway that, the left lane is meant for passing. And that's what it is. You don't want to regulate, the other person. You don't want to ride right beside somebody because now you don't have a way to go. You don't want to be the cop that says, well, okay, I'm going to act like I'm a cop because you're only supposed to be doing 45 and you want to do 50. If you want to go slow, get in the right-hand lane and stay there, okay? I mean, I do, there are days I don't want to drive fast, and whether it's the highway or the back roads or whatever it is, if I'm in the right lane, again, anybody can do what they want. The Camaro can go flying past me. I don't care. My job is to get there safely on my own. And again, it's all I'm doing is obstructing traffic. In the left lane, you'd be amazed how many 2 people will ride right beside each other.
All the time.
Well, okay, not only did you back up all these other vehicles and you're not being courteous, but also something happens, again, we're all together, we're all going to have a nice little big pileup. Versus, again, you got a crazy driver, you got a driver texting, let him go. Just let him go. Pull over to the right lane and let him go.
Absolutely.
Take the safe approach.
Absolutely. Jim, I appreciate your time. I mean, it's not often that we get to have a conversation about a a car wreck attorney teaching you how not to get into a car wreck. I mean, it's kind of the opposite of what we think you would want as a business person. But the fact is, you've always taken a different approach. I mean, you give people your cell phone. You do all these things differently. And I think that's what has made you as successful as you are over these past 30 years, is that you're not afraid to do things a little bit differently. And I think people take notice. And again, I really appreciate the advice. I appreciate the time you took. And looking forward to doing this again soon.
Sounds good. Appreciate it very much. Hope it's helped.
Take care. Bye-bye. That's it for this episode of the Kentucky Auto Accident Podcast. Jim Desmond will be back in 2 weeks to provide information you need to know related to car accidents and motorcycle wrecks in Kentucky. Until then, check out AttorneyDesmond.com. You can also follow him on Facebook at Attorney James Desmond. Drive safely, and please remember to buckle up.